As we are pretty close to the bottom of the hour, I wanted to introduce today's presenter, who for I believe most all of you needs no introduction. Allison Singleton is the Genealogy Services Manager here in the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne. She has worked here for a number of years. She is really the driving force behind and with our virtual program. So you've seen her face and you've heard her wisdom for several years now that we've been doing virtual programs. And I'm so pleased to be able to offer her program and her expertise to you this afternoon. So without further ado, Allison Singleton presenting for us on Go West Young Man, Westward Migration in the Mid-1800s. And your slide looks perfect, Allison.
Thank you, Kurt. Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending the afternoon or morning, evening, whatever time it is where you are with us. I really appreciate it. So we are going to talk about westward migration in the mid-1800s, sorry. Something to keep in mind is this is a very broad topic. So we will be looking at this quite broadly. So if you are hoping to find something very specific, you might be slightly disappointed, but there might be a kernel that could help. So make sure that you stick around. We're going to cover a lot of territory. We're going to cover a little bit of history for context, and we're going to cover a little bit of basically resources that might be helpful as well. So let's go ahead and talk about what is the West? Well, the West, it's the American frontier or the Wild West or Old West. It can be a lot of different places. It includes the geography, history, folklore, and cultural expression of life with that American expansion. So it was especially encouraged by President Thomas Jefferson following the Louisiana Purchase. And the expansionist attitude was also known as manifest destiny. So there's a lot of different places that were covered through the West. And if you look at this map and you think about it, we were settled mostly in the colonial area along the coast, all the way down to Florida. And everywhere there's a coast is where it was typically settled first. I say typically, it's not 100%. We're going to talk on a lot in general terms. So in order of their assimilation, we have the 13 colonies, and then New Sweden, New Netherland, New France, Vermont Republic, Louisiana Territory, Rupert's Land, which is Dakota Territory, Spanish Florida, Republic of Texas, Oregon Country, California Republic, Colorado Territory, Montana Territory, Crow Nation, Utah Territory, Oklahoma Territory, Indian Nation, New Mexico Territory, Arizona Territory. So these are all different places that were considered the West. But if you are settling from, if you think about it, if you're settling from New England and then looking, okay, what's west of New England? And okay, that could be Ohio, that could be Kentucky, that could be Indiana, Illinois, Michigan. And it just continues to go west from there. Manifest destiny, okay. So this is expansionist. It's about expanding the borders of the United States. The idea was used to validate acquisitions in different areas. And it was used to justify the purchase of Alaska and annexing Hawaii. It was coined in around 1845 by John L. O'Sullivan. He expanded the idea later on in invoking the right of our manifest destiny to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federated self-government entrusted to us. So basically, this was the whole concept of taking land. if you've studied your history books, again, this is a very broad view of this. I'd recommend looking up Manifest Destiny. I'd look up and see how that would have impacted where your ancestors lived. There's a lot of really amazing information there. But the prospect of annexing Texas, that was a response. Manifest Destiny. Dispute with Britain over Oregon Territory, that was Manifest Destiny. The triumph of the Mexican-American War, so that's gaining land through Manifest Destiny, including Arizona, California, Western Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, and Utah. So it was a very important idea. So that was before the American Civil War. And it just kind of continued as people wanted to look at this land and say, okay, this is something that we want to expand upon. We need land to live on. We want to basically have a place where American people and their institutions could continue to live in the United States and make it into an image of the East. So it's kind of an interesting concept. The railroads definitely made it even more accessible. So as the railroads were built, that's when more and more people started moving west. Not to say they didn't move before then. I saw somebody mention a wagon train already in the chat. That's when people were taking the wagon trains. That's when people were walking, riding, any way they could go, over boat, through rivers, canals, whatever they could to get to new land. And land. Oh my goodness. It's a lot of land for these different places to take. So let's talk about what some of these land acts were, ordinances were, that encouraged people to go west. The Land Ordinance of 1785, that was adopted on May 20th, and it set up a standardized system where settlers could purchase title to farmland in undeveloped West. So Congress didn't have the power to tax by direct taxation. So land sales was providing that revenue stream. So it was a very important piece of our government to have this revenue system. And if you look, you can also see how this was where it originated with the townships and the sections. And so this is the basis for the public land survey system. Let's talk about the Donation Land Claim Act of 1850. And just to let you know, there are other acts, there are other laws that happened during these time periods. I'm just hitting among some of the bigger ones. The Donation Land Claim Act of 1850, it was a statute. It was enacted in late 1850, and it was intended to promote homestead settlements in the Oregon Territory. It was the forerunner of the later Homestead Act, but it brought thousands along the Oregon Trail. 7,437 land patents were issued under the law, which expired in 1855. The Homestead Act of 1862, the Homestead Acts there were several Homestead Acts, and it was where the applicant could acquire ownership of government land or the public domain, which is homestead. And there were more than 160 million acres of public land, or 10% of the total area of the United States, which was given away to 1.6 million homesteaders. So if you're a descendant of one of those homesteaders, go ahead and do a shout out in the chat, because that's pretty amazing. 1.6 million homesteaders. Pacific Railroad Act of 1862, a series of acts of Congress that promoted the construction of a transcontinental railroad through the United States. And that was through the issuance of government bonds and grants of land to railroad companies. They really wanted to encourage that westward expansion. The Morrill Act of 1862. Notice 1862 is a big year. The Morrill Land Grant Acts are statutes that allowed the creation of land grant colleges in the US using the proceeds of federal land grants. So the purpose was, without excluding other scientific and classical studies and including military tactic, to teach such branches of learning related to agricultural and mechanic arts. So basically, many different schools were created out of this, and maybe a school that you perhaps went to. The Timber Culture Act of 1873. It was a follow-up to the Homestead Act, and it was passed by Congress in 1873. It allowed homesteaders to get another 160 acres of land if they planted trees on 1/4 of the land. Because the land was almost an entire plain of grass, so they wanted to make sure that they were adding the trees to make sure that the land wasn't just grass. It's unfortunate that that didn't help with the Dust Bowl at a later time. But why did everybody go west? Why were these families moving, just kind of leaving their homes, pulling up their roots and transferring them to a new place? Well, there were expelling forces. So maybe it was a lack of economic success. Maybe where they were living, they weren't able to make the money that they were hoping for. Or maybe they needed to leave to make a living. And if there were multiple people in the same town that had the same occupation, perhaps they couldn't get enough business to make a living. Overcrowding. As more and more people settled certain areas and more children were born and continue, it's going to overcrowd. Perhaps it's uncongenial social, political, cultural, or religious atmosphere. Maybe it's not what they are looking for. And perhaps it's the belief that the processes of urbanization and industrialization were corrupting people and hindering the proper raising of children. I find that one to be very interesting, and it is something that people gave as a reason to move west. Attracting forces. So there's always a push and a pull. And we tell people that all the time when they come in and ask us about, hey, I know somebody in my family moved and I want to know why. Well, is it a push or a pull? Well, the pull, the attracting forces, hope for economic improvement. So perhaps it's having that occupation, or someone in the chat already put gold. Maybe they're looking for that. Adventure and lure of nature. Perhaps they enjoyed the country. Perhaps they wanted to be away from people. Perhaps that they really enjoyed the idea of adventure and something new. There was correspondence with friends and family who had migrated before. So perhaps they had a friend or family who already moved and they were sending letters back saying, oh, this is an amazing place. We are having such success here. Our crops are great. We have great business, etc. So the correspondence did a lot. And the abundance of and great availability of land was probably the strongest attracting factor. Owning something, having something in your name, that was a really big sticking point with a lot of people, especially coming from environments where perhaps they were renting a house, or they were in maybe as much as a tenement type building. Having your own land would be absolutely amazing. So what kind of migration records are there? What can you find? Well, there's quite a few things. So here are just a few ideas. And we're going to go through a bunch of different sources to kind of help you find these and hopefully the locations that you are specifically looking for. But transportation records. Are there transportation records for every mode of transportation? No. But you might be able to find something. Maybe you're looking for a boat record. Maybe you're looking for railroad records. Maybe you can find something like that. Census records, directories, church records are huge. You can follow how somebody moved. Plat maps, land and property records, voting records, tax records, merchant records. This one's really big. If you can find the merchant records for where your family bought supplies, that could be an amazing resource for you. Local histories, medicinal records. If they saw a doctor at some point, many doctors kept really amazing records. Business records, diaries and journals. Perhaps it's not a diary or journal of your direct ancestor, but it's somebody who lived in the area. It could mention your ancestor. Letters, again, maybe not for your direct ancestor, but they talked about their friends and family and neighbors. Court records and school records. School records are interesting because sometimes they would note where the child came from before. And that could be a really amazing record for you to find. So let's talk about some of these different things that you can find. In your first handout, I have a load of resources. These sources, I have all sorts of different books for you to peruse, check out, see if you can find them online. And then it goes into number 11 is Family Search. And we're going to go through those because those are the different websites that I can show you pretty quickly. So the first one is Family Search. Now, Family Search is a fantastic resource. And if you're not utilizing the Research Wiki, you really should make sure that that's something that you start using. It's under the search function up at the top of the screen. If you hit search, there's a drop-down menu, and then you'll have the Research Wiki as an option. And then you can type in a state, a country, a topic. So this one is United States Migration Internal. And this talks about the different routes that they could take. It talks about the different records that are possible. It talks about the different record sets that are available. So this is a really amazing resource, and I really enjoy using the Research Wiki also for the history portion as well. So make sure that you are utilizing Family Search, Research Wiki. This one is the National Archives. Specifically, there's an entire section on exploration and westward expansion. So this is going to have information on land entry case files. It's going to have information on the history of some of the acts. It's going to have information on explorers, surveys, expeditions, migrations and migrants, conflicts and military. So there's going to be a lot of great information in here that could help you with your research. This one's through the University of Washington. They have the America's Great Migrations Project. This is a fantastic resource. It talks about different forces that moved people from one location to another. So a lot of times universities do these great projects where they look at different pieces of history. And in fact, I was looking at one earlier that I didn't actually include, but there's ones that actually even talk about the historical markers. Unfortunately, that one was more immigration into the country, which is why I didn't include that one. The Western Folklife Center has a lot of amazing history. Now, remember, folklife is part of our family's history, our ancestors' history. So make sure that you're looking into different places like the Western Folklife Center and the Autry Museum of the American West. You can find all sorts of different resources. These museums, these institutions, they're not just for collecting on maybe like Gene Autry, they're also looking at the information that has to do with the environment, the place where he lived. So it could be a really amazing find for you if that's the location, that's the area where your family settled. I'd be remiss to not include Cindy's list. There's always a great list of different sources that you can utilize through her website as well. Okay, Library of Congress. Now this is something else that I really want to drive home. You will notice that this is US History Primary Source Timeline. You're probably looking at this going, wait a second. This is something for the classroom. This is a teaching material. Yes. Oh my goodness, you can get a great summary and find amazing resources by looking at classroom lessons and classroom lesson plans. These are things that are done by experts in the field. So it's done by Library of Congress, and they've put together this entire lesson plan on the American West, and they have amazing resources available for you to use. So this could be something that could help you, or at least give you that historical context for what you're looking for. This is Elon University. So this is basically a finding aid for a bunch of different resources. Think of it as Cindy's list, but it's actually a university's list of American West resources. So if you're looking for images, maybe you are looking for the Edward E. Eyre digital collection or the Everett D. Graff collection of Western Americana. These could be things that you are looking for to help you fill out more of your research, add more of meat to the bones. Here's Archives West. So this is descriptions to primary resources in Western United States. So this could be correspondence, diaries, or photographs. So this could be incredibly helpful if your family settled in this area. The Buffalo Bills Center of the West. Again, it's a museum, but it also has primary sources. So you never want to discount something because it's a museum or something to do with Buffalo Bill. You can find things like the McCracken Research Library. There's over 300 manuscripts, archives, and photographic collections containing primary research materials. This could be the thing that helps you with your research. I'd also be remiss to not mention the mainstream, like Ancestry, Family Search as a whole. These are things that could be incredibly helpful for your research. I would also recommend maybe taking a look at MyHeritage, Find My Past, see what other websites might be helpful for you with those databases. But Ancestry and Family Search are probably the two that I would start with and begin at the beginning with. But let's move on to newspapers. You'll also notice that I gave you a couple more suggestions that we didn't cover. There's state archives, historical societies, and state libraries. Never discount those. Always check them for the location you're seeking information in. But let's move on to newspapers, because newspapers, you can find all sorts of amazing gems in. Now, I did put in a mixture of free and paid newspaper databases. So the ones that are paid have the $ next to them. And then you can also find the free ones. So Ella finds on here, and then I give you some suggestions as well. So let's go ahead and look at newspapers.com because I want to give you a few examples of how to search for things maybe beyond just your ancestor's name. Because when you're searching in places like the American West, wherever it may be, you might need to look beyond just the ancestor's name, and maybe you need to look for something a little different. So for this example, for fun, we're going to look up a rather archaic term called strumpet. Now, many of you may know what that is, but we'll go with it's a step down from the Lady of the Night. So it's, or it could be a Lady of the Night, you never know. It's a term that could be applied to many different people, and perhaps they're using that term instead of a name. If you know about your family, this could be the thing that tells about what's happening. So this is in the Los Angeles Express in 1894, and it's kind of an entertaining article, but the snippet that's enlarged is probably my favorite. But the thing is the girl who is being called a strumpet is also referred to as the McCurdy girl instead of by her first name. So if you're looking for a specific person with a first and last name, they may not be coming up. It may only be coming up with the last name or with a different name that they are using, like strumpet. Another thing you can do is browse. And I always recommend doing this when you're looking for a specific newspaper. Many libraries do have subscriptions to newspapers.com, and you can utilize those for free. You'll notice that I'm using the Allen County Public Library version. So hopefully you are near a library that has access to this. But if you're browsing, this is where you can find out if they actually have the newspaper that you're seeking. You can go into the country and then the state. And for our example, let's just do Arizona. And we're going to go ahead and do Flagstaff. Okay, well, what about this first one? We want to go ahead and try that newspaper. And how about 1891? And we can make more choices. How about May? And we have two choices for the date. So we're just going to go with that first one. Now we have the newspaper. So we have 3 pages of newspaper that we can then go through. So this really helps because let's say you were looking for a newspaper in Flagstaff and you wanted it to be from that very first newspaper, but you were looking for 1890. Well, then you know that this is not the database that you can use to find the information you're seeking. You're going to have to look elsewhere. So make sure that you are looking and trying to play around with all of these different databases. The next one is Newspaper Archive. This also is a paid database, and some libraries across the country do have access to this. We do have a subscription here, as you will see in this slide. And there are many similar newspapers to newspapers.com, but there's also different newspapers to newspapers.com. So it's kind of hit or miss to whether or not you're going to find the same thing. But we're going to go ahead and scroll down because you can do a search if you want, a regular search, but I like the map. The map, again, tells me right away if I'm actually going to find the newspapers that I'm seeking, the newspapers that are actually going to help me with my research. Again, you can put in that first and last name and search all of the newspapers. But again, I sometimes find it easier to do a search of the broader country and then move down to the specific location. Another thing you can do is keyword, and sometimes keyword can help. So if you're looking for something specific, this time we're going to use a different term. We're going to use dog soldiers. And this time it's going to bring up, oh, just a couple million results for dog soldiers. But let's go ahead and refine the results a little bit. So we're going to scroll down, and you can see over here that we have United States is the bottom of the country list, but you can also narrow by date. And so we're going to play around with this and end up with a newspaper in Helena, Montana Territory from June 24th, 1885. So at this point, you then have a newspaper article that talks about, okay, he will meet with resistance from the dog soldiers. And in such case, the military force at Reno is entirely too small, et cetera, et cetera. So if your ancestor was part of the dog soldiers or part of the opposing, that would be an article that could be helpful to your research, and especially to adding more context to your family story. Okay, again, we're going to take a look at this map. I know I keep repeating myself, but I love drilling down to specific locations. We're going to Arizona again. You know, for somebody who chooses Arizona a lot, I've never been there. I would love to. It sounds beautiful. We're going to scroll down because this is where you can get to the Explore Arizona historical newspapers by city. And if you look at the bottom, you also have the option of doing the drop-down menu. Let's go ahead and choose Phoenix for this one. And once you're there, you can search all Phoenix newspapers. So that's incredibly helpful because you have the list here at the bottom of all the newspapers that are for this area. And it tells you the date ranges, but don't be tricked by those date ranges. I will tell you that sometimes you will find a date range and it doesn't have what you're looking for. I was helping a customer today look for something, and the date range was, I think it was 1854 to 1890. And the interesting part was it only had newspapers from 1854, and then it stopped until like 1880. So there was an entire chunk missing. So you have to keep that in mind. These ranges are great because it tells you what's possibly in there, but you want to explore a little bit further sometimes because it's not always 100% accurate. So let's go ahead and click on one. This one says 1933 to 1948. Now, if you look at it, it tells you what year, and it actually tells you that it skips some years. So there's 1933 and 1934 is not there, but there's 1935 and 36 and 37. So when you see this, it just should make you go, huh, okay, what else is missing? By clicking on it, you can then click here, get into this, and do a search for that specific newspaper. Or click on one of the years. Let's go ahead and just click on 1933. Once you do that, then it opens up the issues. Again, I already had questions because we were missing 1934, but as you see, it looks like there's just May. We just have May. So that's kind of disappointing, but it could be what you're looking for. So let's say it is. Let's click on May 1st, 1933. Here is that newspaper in all of its glory. So you can peruse, see if there's information on your family. And that's something that I actually recommend doing. If you know your family lives in a specific location and there is a newspaper, even if you've done a search and you haven't found their name popping up, you want to make sure to look through the newspaper anyway. The name could be grossly misspelled. The OCR could be misreading the name because the newsprint is smeared, or they're double letters, or for whatever reason, it could be not reading the name properly. So you want to make sure that you're still browsing these newspapers to see if there's anything else on your family. Genealogy Bank. This is another paid database. It's through Newsbank, and many local newspapers are through Newsbank as well when you go to your local library and they just have access to maybe your local newspaper. A lot of times they're through Newsbank. But this one has America's Genealogy Bank, and we do have a subscription for that here. We're going to go ahead and do the advanced search because it includes more information. So you can include keywords, exclude keywords, and the date. I find that to be helpful. This time we're going to do a different phrase, mail order cowboy. And we're going to be specific about the dates that we want, 1860 to 1900. Okay, historical newspapers found 11 items. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and see what those are. Okay, we have some advertisements, etc. Let's scroll down because now we want to see if there's another option that we could do. There are. You can be more specific about which state that you're looking in. So always make sure to utilize the filters on every one of these databases. Okay, so Elefind. I noticed somebody already put Chronicling America in the chat. The reason I didn't include Chronicling America is because Elefind actually searches Chronicling America plus other newspaper archives on top of that. Utilize both if it makes you feel better. And actually, maybe you should. I don't know, maybe it has a different search function. But you can do Elefind and search all of them at once, which is incredibly helpful. So if you go here, this time we're going to do Sinbuster because that sounds like fun. And okay, we got Sinbuster in here, and now we need to use those filters. We're going to go into Refined Search. We want those US records. Let's start with that. Okay. And now we have all sorts of different pieces of information on Sinbusters. But here's something fun. There's a list of titles up at the top. If we go there, then we have those 73 results. I did a search for Arizona. So we have Arizona newspapers, and it tells you exactly what's there, and it tells you how many issues, when it starts, when it stops. So the ones that have the larger numbers, those are the ones with more newspapers. Okay, so lists of online newspapers by state. This is also an incredibly amazing tool. The first one that I put in the handout is a Google site that somebody's created because they like us and want us to have nice things. So it's a listing of these historical newspapers, and you can click on a different location. And yes, I'm just picking on Arizona today, probably because I want to go there. And once we go there, you can look at the different names of the newspapers. You can see the years covered, what the cost is. They tell you whether it's a paid site or a free site, and then what that resource is. So those Library of Congress ones that you see, those would be in Chronicling America. But you can also see if it's going to be in something else like Genealogy Bank. Somebody also just put this link in the chat, but it's also in your handout. It's the Ancestor Hunt. So the Ancestor Hunt is another place where you can find a list of newspaper links, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Again, I don't know why people put these together for us, but I so appreciate them for it. They are doing us all a great service. You can scroll down, and then you have a list of the different states and historical newspapers. Again, we're going to pick on Arizona, pick on Enjoy, and we're going to go ahead and scroll down. Once you do, it starts telling you what newspapers are available. So we have the statewide collections, and it starts with the list of Chronicling American newspapers. So even if you don't go specifically to Chronicling America, you can get to those links through the Ancestor Hunt, and they'll tell you what newspapers are available and what's already there. I sometimes find this more helpful than going to Chronicling America and navigating that website, I find it to be slightly clunky. It's an amazing resource, don't get me wrong. It is absolutely amazing, but sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to navigate. So going to the ancestor hunt and seeing what is specifically there, and if it's even going to help you with your research first before going into Chronicling America. There's another one, ThoughtCo, somebody else put together an entire list of newspapers state by state. It's an older list, but some of these are still incredibly helpful. You can go ahead and click on any of them, and it's usually just a project that somebody has put together. This is maybe a controversial one. Many people hate Wikipedia, especially as a resource. Now, I understand anybody can change Wikipedia, so there are questionable amounts of material in there. But if you're looking at Wikipedia for sources, it can be incredibly helpful. So make sure that you're not just throwing away Wikipedia. Take a look at it. They have a list of online newspaper archives. You can scroll down. There's the United States, Arizona again. And there's just a couple there, but if those are the ones you're looking for, that could be the piece of information that makes your research happen. So make sure that you're checking even things like Wikipedia. I usually recommend to people that if you're researching something new, you can also look in Wikipedia, not just Family Search Research Wiki, but look in Wikipedia for the topic and look at the very bottom. Don't read the stuff in the middle, but look at the very bottom for their sources. Where did the people who put that information in, where are they saying they got their information? Where did they get the citations? Where did they get that pieces of information? Because those are the things that are really going to help you with your research. Always look at the sources. I do that with books too. You always look at the back of the book. You always look at the bottom of the page. You always look at where people got their information. How are they proving whatever is true? Okay, this one. This one is a list of major state newspaper repository for every state west of the Mississippi. This is something I did for you guys. The second handout is that list. I went through and tried to find the repository that had the largest number of newspapers for each state. Now, is this exhaustive? Absolutely not. You should also use every other resource that we've gone through because there's going to be more information that is going to be helpful to you. But that second handout that was just posted in the chat again, that has that list for you. So it's a good starting point for you. Again, make sure that you leave no stone unturned. You want to make sure that you're looking at all of the different databases and different places for resources, but I did try to make you a nice list of online records. This one, a lot of times people question, and occasionally people forget that Google is something that you want to do. Googling is incredibly helpful for genealogy research, not just for historical context, but also searching for your ancestor. You never know what's been digitized. You never know what someone else has put online. There are amazing people doing amazing work all over the country, all over the world, putting records online, digitizing, transcribing, having just indexes created of records, and they go online every day. So if you're not finding something on your family, take a break and try again in a month or two, because you never know what has hit the internet in that time period. But when you Google, you can Google things in quotations. So you could put your ancestor's name, John Smith, in quotations, because it's a common name. Maybe you want to put the middle name in. So John Quincy Smith, and then do a search. Google is an incredibly powerful resource. And I think as genealogists, we very often discount it when we really should be using it in every search. Someone put in the chat, Google Books is a great resource. Yes. Google News still has many of their archived newspapers as well. You'll be linked to them through the ancestor hunt. And then you could also use Google Scholar. There's so many different things you can find. Perhaps you'll find photographs. Maybe you'll find videos that explain some sort of event that happened in your ancestor's life that they were a part of. So make sure that you're looking for things on Google.
Thank all of you for joining us on a Tuesday afternoon, the 1st of November. If you're anything like Allison and our team here, where did the year go? But since it's gone by so quickly, why not hop on the rest of our virtual programs here in November and enjoy yourself as we're walking our way to the holiday seasons. So thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening at 6:30 or whenever your interest brings you to our virtual doorstep. Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you later on.
Thank you.